the newest episode of Borderline Podcast Disorder. Um, have you had a good week? Was it good? And I hope it was good because my week I want to say it was okay, but yeah, it was actually okay. Although the problem is, I think since last Monday, I woke up with a lot of pain on my neck, and I felt very dizzy when going from like sitting on my back to standing up and stuff like this. So I had to take things a bit slower. I didn't. I didn't. I had to actually. I think for the first 2 or 3 days, the dizziness was quite. What should I say? More like aggravated, or it was worse. The dizziness was worse, and I actually ended up having to cancel a spot on Tuesday night because I just yeah, I just didn't feel good enough to be able to walk, and not necessarily just walk, but it was more about using the like underground and commuting to places because I obviously well, I did mention before, I think that I get travel sickness quite a bit, and then I think I was just that combined with the headache that I already have. I don't know how it's gonna go, and sometimes I think when it's like shorter journeys, yeah, I feel like I'm happy to take the risk, but this was on like a fairly further away. I think I want to say a little bit like over an hour away of a journey, and yeah, I decided against it. But and then I did a comedy show at the Jewish Center on Wednesday night, and as the up and coming act, it was interesting. It was interesting, challenging, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed the experience, and then I think I did another gig where I tried some new material, and something came out of it, which is good. Yeah, it was quite funny. I think loads of some comedians before me mentioned anxiety, but given the room was very quiet, like I think they seemed like they were enjoying themselves. And then the feedback was good after, but throughout the set there were loads of like eyes just like staring and a lot of nodding rather than laughter, like the audible laughter. And yeah, some lots of the comedians were talking about like anxiety, and I was like, you know what, I wasn't anxious actually before I came on, but I might this might have added up to my depression, but obviously that was a joke. And again, I am actually happy because I got some new material that I wasn't even expecting to just from the riffing on stage, and thank God for that. That's good. And look, I've still got some. Yeah, I think life is a bit tough. I want to say at the moment, it's a lot going on. Comedy is going really well. The podcast is going really well. I'm very close to sort out my issues with my day job, and the studying. My studies towards my degree in engineering is going good. I'm enjoying it, and I think the first semester was over. Actually, it was a half term break. Again, it was a bit annoying because I actually wanted to use this week to chill out a bit, and I was actually meant to catch up with some people that I haven't seen in ages and stuff like that. But then instead, I had to just sit on the couch and feel very sorry for myself. Although, having said that, I think on Thursday I did decide, because I didn't feel like I was in I didn't feel good enough to go to the gym. I think actually on Wednesday I was meant to go. I didn't feel good enough because I was like, I don't want to, like again, because I do some like strength workout, and then I do either like cycling or running after, and I didn't feel that it was the smartest idea from me to go to the gym having the vertigo. And so I went for a walk in the forest nearby on Thursday, which actually ended up being really nice. Although some of the path was very muddy, and I had to, I used it almost like a puzzle, I guess. Where I was just trying to go and find the least muddier way out of the forest, and it felt good. It felt so good. Yeah, I was really pleased with myself for having done that. And then on Friday, we took Sarma and Pickle. I took Sarma and Pickle to have them spayed, and oh my god, I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect what happened, which was we had to like leave them there for the day, pick them up in the evening. But the amount of stress, coming back home and almost making sure that everything is whether everything is okay, whether you I had to sign those like a request to like resuscitate in case something goes wrong. And I was being walked through when I signed the terms and conditions, like the agreement or whatever, about like the worst case scenarios, and I was heartbroken. It felt so real. I even mentioned to the doctor that I didn't have to sign a form to like resuscitate my mom, when she was in hospital, and she didn't find that particularly funny. I gotta say that. I think she I should have mentioned I do stand up comedy. I guess maybe that would have helped the situation. I thought I'm de-escalating anyway, but yeah, it was quite an anxious time. And then I ended up going to the gym yesterday, and then on the way back I went and checked in on the vets building. And then in the evening managed to collect, like to pick them up, get them home. They're under some treatment with like painkillers and stuff like this, and I have to get them next week in for a review, just to see how they are healing and stuff like this. But yeah, I don't think I ever want to go through this again. I gotta be honest. Although it was, yeah, I guess I don't know. It was. I want to say in one hand, it was a beautiful, like it was a very wholesome experience. I didn't expect myself to be, you know, um, so I don't even know what the word is. Like I didn't expect myself to be so, not even determined, but so attached to this whole situation. Although I think it might sound bad, I love my kitties. I love them so much. But that was also that was something that I did not expect to show in such a way, in the way that it did. If it doesn't make sense, that's okay. I don't think I understand yet everything that has unfolded yesterday. But yeah, no, they are home. They're back home now. They are good. Although they start hissing at each other, I think they don't recognize each other anymore, because I imagine the smell might have changed when in the hospital. So we had to keep them apart for the night yesterday, and then today we are slowly, getting them to be like in the same room and just walk past each other and stuff like this, just to make sure that they get used to each other again, while trying to find ways on how to put their medication in the food and stuff like that, which I feel like, when you have to do it to yourself, it's like, yeah, okay, cool. I have to take this pill, or I have to take this much, painkiller or medication or whatever. But then, how do you, do it with a kitty? How do you convince them, to eat it and stuff like that? It's again, I didn't expect this, but in a in a way I'm enjoying it, but in another way I find it very stressful. Anyway, I think you've heard enough from me, and that's actually pretty much, not just to be conscious of time or anything, but if that's, I think, fairly pretty good enough of an update. Um, Now this week's episode was with Marco Gamboa. He's a wonderful person. You know, I loved speaking with him. I feel like we could have gone for much longer. He's based in America, and but I think his book has been published in the UK as well. So make sure you check out his socials, and make sure you check out his book. But yeah, what a beautiful this conversation we had. I feel like it's been filled with a lot of, I guess, things that are sad, but yet, you know his mentality of finding humor, or positivity in those things. It's brilliant. I think it's worth taking some pointers out of this conversation. But look, I'll let you decide for yourself what you think about this. And yeah, enjoy my conversation with Marco. Okay, so hello, Marco. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you for thank you for taking the time to do this, and also to be so flexible. Where are you based? Where are we communicating with you from?
So I'm in San Antonio, Texas, and I was born in Chicago. I We had family up there, parents visiting, and then I was born up there. I was there for I think it's like a little under a year, and then as soon as I guess I was cleared to travel, my parents were they lived out of Mexico City, so was in Mexico City until I think I was like 3 or 4, and then my dad's job brought him to San Antonio, and I. I had a girlfriend right after high school that I followed to Austin. That lasted 6 months, and then came right back to San Antonio, and pretty much been here ever since.
No way, that's amazing. Because again, it's a very funny coincidence because I'm a huge San Antonio Spurs fan.
Yeah, they're freaking awesome. I should have worn my Wemby jersey for you.
I have one as well.
But yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
We went last year, and it was the craziest thing because my youngest is in choir, and her school sang. Actually, it was around this time because they sang Christmas songs before the game. And it was crazy because we're sitting, the school gave us an amazing deal on tickets. So we're sitting, in a good spot, and you're looking down at all the players. But with Wemby, you gotta look up a little bit because he's so freaking tall. And so, but no, they're phenomenal. I really like the fact that they brought in Chris Paul too. So hopefully they can improve a little bit more over the next year or so.
Yeah, I mean, I still feel like it's again the whole situation with Greg, because this is actually the reason why I got into supporting San Antonio Spurs, was because my birth last name is Popovich.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I was like, oh, is this like Greg Popovich is is the coach, and also me and Tony Parker shared the same birthday. So this is genuinely what made me pick, because I was like born and raised in a village in Romania. But then I was like, I discovered the NBA, and I was like, oh, who should I pick? And also, the uniforms look so cool. It's like, I
Me
think it's
too.
by far one of the best kits, one of the best badges. And then again, yeah, Tony Parker's birthday, and I was like, okay, cool, that's a sign. I have to support them. So yeah, they've been my at least like my West Conference team ever since.
Yeah, no, I love that, and there's so many amazing teams across the way. So I have a quick question because I see
Yes.
a Patriots. So are you also? Well, actually, two questions. You're also an NFL fan?
I'm yes, I am an NFL fan. I'm not a Patriots fan. I collect memorabilia though.
Oh,
So I
that's
have,
awesome.
yeah, I have loads of like different jerseys and different hoodies, and yeah, too many. I think my partner is very unhappy.
I have another question. So when you tell, because you're out of London, right?
Yes.
So when you tell people that you're a Spurs fan, do they ever think Tottenham?
Yeah, I think so. But I feel like I always lead with the fact that I support again, I talk about basketball first, and
Oh,
then
and
like,
that's
Yeah, but I used to have my in one of my day jobs I had a badge, and the badge has I have the lanyard. It's actually a San Antonio Spurs lanyard.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, someone from work used to make fun of me, going like, "Oh my God, I didn't know you're such a Tottenham fan." And I was like, "No, I'm not a Tottenham fan." It says so clearly San Antonio Spurs. Like, it cannot be clearer that I'm not. So yeah, some people used to tease me like that. And anyway, yes. Again, I don't mind Tottenham Spurs. Have you been to London?
No, I've not. The furthest I've ventured to Europe was Paris. I've been there twice. Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to kind of travel, but I or travel throughout there. I'd love to visit. There's a bunch of cities out there that I would absolutely love to visit.
I was gonna say the stadium, it's really beautiful, the Tottenham stadium, and again I feel like the team, I like again, I don't mind them, but yeah, they're not my, yeah, I do, again, it does get sometimes, but yeah, what about you, like if you're a football fan, who do you support as a San Antonio uh
So I always rooted for the Bears since I was from there. For some reason, San Antonio has this really close relationship with the New Orleans Saints, and so I love the New Orleans Saints. So after Hurricane Katrina, I believe the New Orleans Saints came and played. I don't remember how many games, but they were playing, I think, out of San Antonio for a little bit while they rebuilt their stadium, and then yeah, but I want to say that that's right, but yeah. So I love the Bears. I love New Orleans. I love Dallas, but man, they're just not doing very good. I love the Houston Texans as well, and then I'm a huge DeAndre Hopkins fan. So I pretty much like anywhere he goes, I'll root. Right now he's with the Chiefs, and so yeah, yeah. But
yeah, which, sorry, go on.
I just well, no, I just when COVID happened. I feel like I just didn't have much to do, so that's when I started to really get into watching sports. And then after that, it was baseball, basketball. I mean, I grew up watching basketball and soccer, but that's when I added the football to it, and it was just a good time.
Okay, so then, as because you were talking about like watching soccer since you were like a boy, who did you support? Was it what teams was it that you were a fan of?
So out of Mexico City, my family, for some reason, there's a university there that also has a professional team called Pumas.
Yeah, I know them.
Yeah, yeah, and so we always grew up watching that. Now, that being said, whenever there was like a Gold Cup, World Cup, or anything like that, I mean, we had, of course, back when I was a kid, the U.S. never really made it. Now they're amazing. Obviously, we'd always get upset watching Mexico because we wanted them to do better. And then after that, like it was always, the European countries that we would root for. But yeah, France, Italy, and yeah, but for us, it was just some again as kids, it was just they usually happen during the summer. We would be visiting family in Mexico, so all the cousins, regardless of who was playing, we would just turn on the TV and just I mean, it was like an all day thing just watching soccer. It was such a nice memory to do. And I have two kids, and I try really hard to get them to watch it. Now they love going to games, but they're not a huge fan of like sitting at home watching it. And so, yeah.
Which I kind of, you know what, I understand, because I think, especially since I feel like since the pandemic, I struggle a lot with sitting down and even, like watching movies, or like I'd rather watch sports in person, because I
Hmm.
feel like my attention span I get basically so unfocused so quickly if I
Yeah.
watch television. So yeah, I kind of get it, And I was gonna say, although it's a shame about Mexico not being as good as you'd like, or like even with the U.S. historically, but the Mexico, I was gonna just add this because I remember them since 2006 being like a low key fan of them, because they had, again, some of the best kits
Hmm.
in football. I feel like in like national football history. And also, throughout the time, you had some amazing players. Like I remember Rafa Marquez, the defender.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Huge fan of Rafa Marquez.
Yeah. So here I don't know if you know him, but have you ever heard of Hugo Sanchez?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was really cool. He had retired for a while. We were in Mexico and he had retired, but they realized they never did like a going away game for him in the Aztec Stadium in Mexico City. So it was really cool. It was like a last minute. My dad was able to get tickets, and it was literally they blew the whistle. He made the first kick, and then they did something to stop the game, and he waved, and but it was awesome that technically it was his last game, and so that was that. Now the stadium itself is just incredibly overwhelming because there's no assigned seats, there's no like ushers keeping the peace, and there's fights everywhere, and it was so gross too. They do this when they're doing bad. People will urinate in bottles, and then you just hear, "Here comes the water," and you just see these bottle, and I was like, oh my god, because I was used to going to games here in the States where it's like super controlled security everywhere, and over there I don't even think I saw like one security guard. It was like a self-governed kind of game, and but amazing memory of watching him retire right there.
That's amazing. Yeah, the differences are huge, and I mean, I'm sure you obviously, maybe, I don't know if you heard about the stories in like the World Cup that you hosted in the 70s, like Mexico hosted in the 70s. Romania has some of the best memories from that World Cup because we did like
Really?
really, yeah, we did really well there. So really well there. So I remember when I was, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 11, I read a book which is called Guadalajara, and it's about Romania's journey at the World Cup. Which again, I should know better the years precisely, but I don't. However, yeah, we are very fond of it historically, and yeah, I remember when I used to go in Romania on TV, we'd watch. There was something called football replay where they would play old football games, and I used to watch they used to play the games that we had in Mexico. It was
That's
amazing.
awesome.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
said, I wrote it down. You said the book is called Guadalajara.
yeah,
I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds
yeah.
really interesting.
I'll send you the details of it actually after, because
Okay.
it's like a Romanian again, like sports commentator and sports journalist who wrote it, and it's about the whole experience because it was also quite interesting because obviously in Romania being a communist country at the time, people weren't allowed to leave in many occasions. So actually, for anyone who managed to leave at the time, even to just go for the duration of the World Cup, it was like a huge thing because everyone was like, "Oh my God, this is great. This is so different. Like it's something that we can't really do." And yeah, it was quite wild. But anyway, let's come back to you because the okay, where do we start? Because you were saying that you were born in Chicago and then you moved down to San Antonio, but then you've always like traveled between I guess like San Antonio and Mexico City.
I did a lot when I was younger. And then around, gosh, I think the last time I was out there was like 2008-ish, 2009. And then, which is, I guess, kind of a good segue to the book. So it was one of the last times that, that I was traveling a lot. So my dad's been in the airline industry his whole life. So it was awesome because the world, well, at least, North America was so small to us because we could just jump on a flight. It was really awesome. But yeah, so that was about the last time. And then in 2011, I had my oldest kid. Around that time, I started to feel sick, and I had a lot of weakness, vertigo. I had a lot of instances where cognitively, like I would just lose my train of thought and kind of, I was unable to kind of latch onto thought. So, and it's not like, I don't know if you've ever had panic attacks, but it's not like a panic attack where your mind's racing and you're catching it, but it's going. This is one of those where your mind's just blank, and so I was having a lot of those instances. Go to the doctors, and for about 10 years, everyone was always like, "Oh, it's anxiety, it's anxiety." So I mean, I tried everything, right, from like medicines to meditation, therapy, all sorts of stuff, and it never got better, it got worse. And so what ended up happening was I became agoraphobic. So I went from this person who would just jump on a plane at any given point. My dad, was able to give like a family login to where I wake up and go. One time I woke up in a plane. I had drinking the whole night before. My sister had texted me. She was in New York. She was like, "Hey, there's this band that we really love. They're going to play." And I came to, so drunkenly, I had made a reservation, ordered a cab, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm on my way to New York. And then, and so the world was really small. And then all of a sudden, when I started to feel sick, I just stopped going out because I hated being out, feeling sick, and not being able to communicate what was happening. And then the worst part was because it was such a kind of unknown thing, I started to feel crazy. And and to no blame of anybody's, a lot of family and friends didn't really understand. A lot of them were really supportive, but a lot of them, just didn't grasp it very well. So fast forward, uh, finally in like 2020, I finally get the diagnosis that I have multiple sclerosis. And then, after that, medications came on board and so on. And so, kind of tying it back to your question, I went from, traveling a lot and doing everything to just being isolated. And I think because I had been so stimulated as a kid and, going all over the place, what ended up happening was I started to write these short stories because my kids knew something was up. They knew dad didn't go out much. They knew, stuff like that. And I thought, listen, one day they're going to say like dad wasn't a normal dad, quote unquote, but at least he created something. So I wrote all these short stories with the idea that one day I'd gift them these short stories. And then as I started to kind of shop it around, not shop it around, but show it to friends to kind of give me feedback, they were like, man, you should really try to, publish this. And so I went through that whole journey, found a really kind publisher that loved it and did that. And so, yeah, it you know, it went from almost, not almost, it did go from one extreme to the other of just being so adventurous, so everything to then being very calculated, very reserved, very blocked off, very kind of like a hermit, not kind of, I mean, that's really what I kind of became. When COVID happened, a part of me was like, this is awful. So many people dying and whatnot. But what do they call it?
The
Where,
lockdown?
yeah, the lockdown. To me, it was such a natural thing to be like, oh, I can entertain myself around the house, like no problem. But yeah, that's how kind of the traveling and the stories and all that kind of pieced together.
And there are some things I've picked up on that, and I wanted to ask you about. One, the first one that I wanted to ask you about was, saying that when you again like around 2011, when you had all those symptoms, and you were told, or like I guess, yeah, the thing that you'd hear the most is that it's all like.
Hmm.
Have you been aware around that time that you were struggling at all with anxiety, or was like something that you were familiar from a time before, or was that actually the first assumption and the first time when you actually, I guess, thought about anxiety, or that you did any research of any kind, or again, like, was 2011 the time when you discovered it, or is it something that you actually dealt with in the past knowingly?
That's a really great question. And recently I was talking to someone about it, and I think I figured it out. So, first off, to answer your question, I've always been an anxious kid, right? Like ever since I was little, there's just something in me that was anxious. What I think happened is stress, anxiety, all that stuff will flare up the MS. So, what I think happened is I was anxious, the MS happened, I had a kid, and it was this perfect storm where the stress and the anxiety exacerbated the symptoms. And so it turned into this thing of like, well, I've always been an anxious kid. And so I think that's why doctors would focus in and say, like, well, it's anxiety, it's, depression. And so that's where they would kind of take off running with it. And no one looked at, like, well, there's this other stuff going on that it could be a larger thing. But I started to research all sorts of stuff of anxiety. I tried everything. I mean, hypnotherapy, I tried, and it would help. But as soon as there was some sort of like trigger or something like that, like bam, like I would slur, I would, just I couldn't think. And so, the other one that was really crazy is my eyes sometimes will not really control themselves. And so, like, even if I'm like talking to you, neurologically something triggers, I guess, where like I like like if you tell me like sometimes, and one doctor was like, that's kind of strange, when you go to the eye doctor and they do the thing where they move
Yeah.
left or right, she was like, your eyes almost are struggling to stay on one point. But again, You didn't think anything of it. She thought maybe you're just anxious because you're in a doctor's office and stuff like that. But um, I researched anything and everything. I wanted to feel better. I wanted to be, who I was, which was an anxious person, but able to do almost anything. And so, yeah. And there's such a rabbit hole. I don't know. You go to one therapist, and everyone has best intentions, but therapists will treat it differently. You go to Psychology Today, because I would go to that website all the time. And, sometimes, well, if it's this, and this can help. And so there seems to be so many different answers for the same thing. And then in today's time, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, in today's time, there's such a positive and such a negative. The positive is that medication wise, there is so many amazing options if people are into medicine. I know sometimes on the MS side, there's people that are like, no, I'm not taking anything. On the anxiety side, I know there's people that are like, no, I'm not going to take anything. I don't want to lose my edge or whatever, which is cool. If you do want medicine, I do feel that there are amazing, innovative medications that can really help. On the downside, with social media and with everything, everyone wants to make a buck, right? I'm like that too. I love money. There are so many people that are like, I'll sell you the solution, right? And so there's this weird thing where like everyone's monetizing everything. There's so many medications. And so it's almost like the best and worst time to be alive, because you could feel better, but you could also be really confused. And, it's just interesting.
I I think with this is that again I feel like this is our struggle, like our generation's struggle, because I feel like it's arguably there was for every single generation there was a certain bit where it's like, hey, this is the best and the worst time to be alive. I don't know, like for example, sometimes I think if you like, I love, again, I love like hot rod, right? So then I feel like, oh, sometimes I wish I was born like 40 or 50 years ago, because I would have actually enjoyed the automobile, like the classic, better than you do now, when you have like all these like electric cars, like that's where the world is moving. And anyway, I feel like that's a weird analogy, but I don't know why I went there. All I'm saying is I feel like every generation is struggling with like, oh, it feels like the best and the worst. And I feel like, yeah, you're right. It's a very fair point, because I agree that in one hand everyone's trying to, again, I feel like as a now, or like as a person who's watching all this, I'm probably, again, I choose to be perhaps skeptical, and even on these solutions, and I'm like, hey, it sounds like it's working for you, but I don't know if it's working for me. And even with mental health, I guess, treatment and science, it's like a very new thing. We are, again, like 20 years ago, I think even 10 years ago, I didn't, yeah, because again, being, with like my background of like coming from Romania, and anxiety, depression, again, even like the fact that I have a disorder, it was something that I couldn't comprehend existing or being a thing. And now there is all this, again, there is actually a lot more awareness about it. However, the problem is that because it's still such a new thing, yeah, I feel like, yeah, the amount of I feel, even with myself, or like I've been on wrong SSRIs. I've been in the SSRIs which actually made me feel terrible, and then I was just like, this is annoying. And it's also, when I spoke to a doctor and they're like, hey, I think we can try this as a cause of treatment, it used to make me very angry, because I was like, hey, I don't want to try, I want to know precisely that this is going to work. But unfortunately, this is not how it works. And I kind of saw it from some, again, friends of mine who are like battling cancer, and their doctor said the exact same thing to them, where they were like, hey, look, we're going to try this treatment. So it's the exact same, I guess, thing that applies to everyone, where it's like, hey, we're just going to try it. It might work, it might not work, and then let's just see how it goes. And then, yeah, with anyone like trying to take, this is the thing, I feel like it's a fine line between people trying to, because again, for people trying to like sell their product or like sell their services, yeah, I'm all for it. I feel like this is, it's the right thing to do. However, again, when it crosses the line to manipulation, that's a totally different story. but I also feel like it has to be taken onto a case to case basis. Because I
Mhm.
feel like sometimes I can see people who are like, hey, look, I discovered this like really cool thing and it's helped me. It's gonna help you. What about you like buy it from me? Fine. But then if if you say that it's actually not true, or you know that you're actually manipulating someone, that's where a bigger there's a bigger problem. I don't know if I answered your
No, you
question.
did. No, 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 you did. But I do want to clarify because so when I said about like it's like the best and worst time, I meant specifically when dealing with like an illness because there's so much
Yeah.
information and stuff like that. As far as like in life, I 100% agree with you. Have you ever read and I'm probably going to butcher her name. So she wrote Station 11, but Emily St. John Mandel.
No?
So she loves to write books about like pandemics and like, kind of like a very apocalypse-ish kind of thing. And she had, and I'm paraphrasing, probably going to butcher it, but she had this beautiful quote that when people say like this is the worst time, that it was almost this narcissistic thing of like I deserved better, right? Like I'm not taking all the good that is really there. And so like in life, I totally like the fact we have air conditioning, the fact that I can order food, like there's so many small things that make life comfortable that I totally agree with you. Like I think I I'd love to go back in time and visit like a Woodstock show, or I'd love to go, to a concert, or but no, 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 you take me home as soon as that's done, right? You take me back to this
Yeah.
life, this time right now. But yeah, I just want to clarify. Yeah, no, I agree with you. You know what I also think too when people say like, "Oh, this is the worst time." I also think that as kids, the adults were handling it, right? And now that we're the adults and we're the ones that are handling it, we're like, "Well, this is the worst time." Because now we're kind of the ones that are at the brunt of it. But I don't know. I try to be a really optimistic guy. I have my moments, right? But I feel like even with the illness, even with everything that's going on in this world, like I wouldn't trade this life for any other thing in this world to offer. Because you make, even with the MS, like, yeah, it was awful. I have my bad days, but look at this, like what an amazing thing to then like get to meet you across the world and sit and talk with you and talk sports. And I guarantee you, I'll stay in touch with you. One day when I visit London, I'm gonna reach out to you and we'll
Yes,
we'll go
please.
grab a bite or something like that. And so there's so much in a lot of bad. There's so much beautiful things, and I think that that's what I want to really capture. I studied psychology. Um, and they realize that someone can go have the best time in the world. They go to Disney World, they have the best time in the world. When they're leaving Disney World, if they trip and hurt themselves, the whole trip sucks because that's the last thing they remember. That's the thing. And I don't want to do that, right? Like I want to just find what's good out there and really just milk it. Now there's a quote that I have. It's acronymed on my knuckles. It's by an author called Charles Bukowski, and it was "Find what you love and let it kill you." And I love that idea of like I'm just going to get everything that I truly love in this world. And everyone's got a bad card dealt with them, but dealt to them. I'm no different. But gosh, I want to find the good. I want to make life too short, not too long. And I think that that's where I really hang my hat.
Yeah, I mean, you said some like really beautiful things there, and I think on the what you were touching earlier about like how we're talking on a medical perspective. Yeah, for sure. Again, that you are correct, and I even think that I don't know, like you were saying about how in retrospective, and especially because you were saying something about like in nowadays when we have access to so much information that I feel like, especially for someone who's like anxious, it's probably like again one of the worst times, because at least it feels like back in the day you'd speak with your doctor and then they tell you, hey, I think it's this, and then you go home and you're like, okay, it's this. While now you can pull your phone out and you don't even have to type it anymore. You can just ask like your like AI, assistant,
Hmm.
about those symptoms, and you're going to get some of the most terrifying results in the world. And then how can you, I feel like, yeah, how can you live with it, or like how can you, power through this, or like go, okay, fine, that's fine, I'm not gonna overthink it. How can you not overthinking when all the ingredients for overthinking are in your pocket? You're like
Yeah,
one click away to find out the worst case scenario about everything.
I love that. I think you should make that into a t-shirt. Overthinking is one click away.
Yeah. Well, thank you. But I feel like this is, those podcasts definitely help out a lot with yeah, connecting with people from all over, and creating some like meaningful conversations, and starting some bonds and friendships. But also it helps me with quotes. The first person who's telling me that I should turn like a phrase around, or something that I said around. But I was going to ask back on something that you said earlier when you were talking about how, again, obviously now you were talking about how, I don't know, like it sounds like you're obviously you're a very like grounded person, and you're like, hey, look, like in retrospective, I see those things that have happened, and I understand how it went, or like I see it clear, or I get it. While my question was, how did it feel like at the time when you were, again, going through the diagnosis of MS, even like knowing that it might be MS, to now being a new father, a young father who, yeah, like how did that feel for you? Like, what was that like? Were you as open about like your mental health, or were you able to communicate as clearly what was happening to you at the time? Did you kind of, I don't know, like, was it the case of bottling up and only being able to be more, or like open up about it later?
So while it was happening was the absolute loneliest period of time. Because I couldn't, to close friends and family, I would explain it and they were supportive, but they didn't understand it. Right. And so it was absolutely lonely. And then, it was awful too, because there's so many friends that got married during that time. There were, so many events that were happening, and I missed all of it. And so I think on that side of things, it was really difficult. And what I did do a lot, the resources weren't the same as they are now, but I was online all the time. I was trying really hard to build like online friendships and, things like that, people who were going through the same thing, at the time, because it was a straight diagnosis of, anxiety, agoraphobia. I found a bunch of groups on Facebook that were, agoraphobics, and they would do things. I remember there would be like, hey, let's have coffee through. I forgot what it was, like Google Meets back then, or some sort of virtual thing that was
Yeah.
available. And so, I did that. I everything that I could. Right. I would sit and meditate for hours. I would take whatever medications I felt, might help. And so now the crazy thing too was the medicines were something that I had to like ease into, because the anxiety was so bad that even medications were scary back then. And
Mm.
so, but one of the things that I did find was I really began to cherish the relationships that were there for me at the time. And so, there were times where, people just were fed up, right? Like, hey man, you're missing this, you're missing this. They were irritated with me. And one of the most beautiful things, so I've been married twice. First wife, best friends now, but she's the mom of my kids, and I'll never forget, because her mom knew what was going on. She didn't understand it, but she knew I was bored, I was lonely, and and she would call to me and read to me. And I thought, that gesture alone taught me so much of who I want to be for people too. Right. And so, it's one of those things where it was absolutely lonely. The internet, you're right, can make you feel like it's going to get worse. But even then, there were these little glimpses where it was like, even if this never goes away, there's like some really interesting and beautiful things that you can still kind of latch onto.
That sounds beautiful. I feel like you have such a nice way of, again, like seeing or like still pointing at the positive on things. That's the second time you've done it in the last few minutes, and it's amazing. I feel from listening to you, I'm like, yeah, things will get better eventually. Like, yes, you sound so good.
No, no, no. Now, mind you, I'm really curious if we, to our conversation earlier of like going back in time. I wish we could go talk to that Marco. And I do feel that the Marco in the book, because the book is completely fictitious, but I do feel that if you could go back and talk to that Marco, I don't know that that optimism would have been there, right? I
No
don't
way.
know. There's so much that I've done and grown from it that I'm curious. Like, I'm going to be real honest with you. I'm not suicidal at all, right? Like, even in the worst, like I never was. But there were times where I'd be like, all right, if there's a God out there, like it'd be really cool if I could, this could be over, because it was just one of those things where every little task seemed daunting. We lived in an apartment complex. We were on the second story. And I remember just being so depressed because I would take out the trash and sometimes I couldn't even make it to the dumpster. And I have to walk back very slowly, because I just couldn't. And so when I remember those times, I remember coming back and just being like, even the simplest task is impossible to you right now. And so it was just like, what other things in the timeline of life are you not going to be able to do? And so who knows, right? Maybe we do talk to them to talk to that Marco, and that Marco is like, no, like stuff's cool. Like I have my kids, I have, a roof over my head, I have, this or that. Maybe that's what that guy would say, but sometimes I wonder if what I've grown into is a very different version of who I was.
That's so interesting to say because I think from personal experience, the thing with the taking the bins out is like very relatable. I've especially like recently I've been struggling with like my back pain and yeah, like sometimes I feel like the key to fix my back problems are exercising. However, I was so scared of exercising because every time again, like even if I walk, and it's a fairly similar situation where I'd have to go downstairs to take the bins out, and I just go around the building and I just put them there is like a little corner. And then in the last couple of months I would struggle, like that walk felt like the longest walk in the world, and I just feel like every time I lock the door to go down the stairs, I was like, I can't wait to get back. And then as soon as kind of like my feet would hit the pavement, I could feel this pain in my back, and I'm like, I am so tired, and I hate this pain. I hate having to go through this. I'm going back. But then the thing is, I'd be sitting on the couch, and then when I get up, I'm like when I sit down, I feel the pain. When I get up, I feel the pain. I'm like, this is just ridiculous now, and it's very very daunting, and it's interesting. And I very much, how did this change happen, or like when did you notice it happening? When did you kind of like notice your I guess like when did you notice this change in your perception? I guess is it perception? Perhaps.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Like an outlook change. I think it really happened probably like 2016. No, no, no. So I think, sorry, my timeline's all off. No, I don't think it really happened until like 2020-ish, 2021. Once I
No
started to
way.
get on, yeah, because I think like once I started to get on the medicines and I felt comfortable being myself, then it was an incredible thing. And then, one of the other things that I've had to do with all sorts of relationships is I I only keep the relationships that allow me to be unapologetically myself. And I think before I kept relationships because of my feelings that I had to owe something to oh, this was an old boss, or oh, this was an old coworker, whatever the case was. But when I sat with them, I wasn't myself. And I think like as I've allowed myself to kind of, you know, be unapologetically myself, is when I found congruency in my everyday life. Like, don't get me wrong, I have a day job too, right? But even in my day job, I try to be, myself. I'm a really playful person, and I have a very serious, role. And so it's one of those things where, the connections that you make when you show the vulnerability to me are more than just coworkers or, folks that you meet at the gym or, whoever you're interacting with. Showing a little vulnerability, I think, can go a really long way. And so as I did that, I just started to really allow myself to become who I think I always wanted to be, but was always afraid to let people down. Whereas now, I don't care if I let you down because it's one of those things where if I let you down because I was myself, then I'm okay with being a villain in your story. And I'm quoting someone from that. I don't remember who said that, but at this point, I'm going to be kind, I'm going to be courteous and stuff like that. But I also don't want to keep friendships that don't like really like make you feel whole, that you
Yeah,
could just be yourself and they're going to open you, welcome you like, completely. And I think that that's been something that I slowly became myself. And then I saw people really like who I was, and it compounded my ability to really deepen and experiment with who I was and so on. And one of the biggest things too was the book, because the book is really vulnerable. Even though it's fictitious, it's a very vulnerable book. And I think I was terrified, like, what is everyone going to think? What am I going to? And I think once it was out there in the world, it was like, okay, whatever. And when the book first came out, the sales were small and I figured like, oh, it's family and friends. But then I slowly started to see like sales in Germany. I don't even know anyone in Germany. I've never even advertised with a German but somehow someone triggered it and I don't know how it happened, but and so that that feedback of like, being able to come talk with you guys, seeing the book sales, having friends that are like, hey, when are you free next? Having acquaintances being like, oh man, like, when are we going to get to do this together? When are we, like, it gives you the assurance that who you are is a good person. And then you can just kind of have fun with it, really kind of dive into it.
that's so cool.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it. I hope and again, because I know of who I was and who I am now, not saying, 5 years, I'm a totally different person, right? Like, as humans, I think we also morph a little bit into our surroundings, but for the time being, I'm having a really good time.
That's nice. That's very good to hear. And I feel like one of the things that you said earlier about the one about like, I feel like ending a friendship at the cost of, or for the fact that, you don't like this like version of myself or like the me, then that's fine. And I very much agree with it. And I feel like in one way or another, I kind of lived by that, or like I live by that. Now it is, like I wouldn't feel comfortable with lying about myself like this. So then if you want to, again, like I agree, if you want to, be a part of my life, or if you want for us to like, be share like a story together, then we gotta do it, or at least to me, I have to be honest with myself, because otherwise then kind of means that you want this version of me which is fabricated to be your friend, not
Yeah.
the actual me as a person. Yeah, I see that a lot, and I feel like there is a huge crossover with the things I've learned in like DBT when I after I got diagnosed, where it's because we apparently naturally people with BPD have this tendency of like people pleasing, and I was like, oh my god, yeah. And in the last 2 years, I was like, you know what? No, I feel like it sounds bad, but I feel like one of the easiest words to say now, if to me, it's no. And someone's like, "Do you want to do this?" And I was like, "No, honestly, I don't," and that's fine. I think that's actually better than anything.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to send you a link because someone just sent it to me, and it's a doctor talking about how a lot of folks with chronic illness, autoimmune disorders, things like that, they're people pleasers. And so they don't know the correlation, but they do notice it. I'll send you the link because I think that's really interesting. But I'll tell you a funny story. So I'm the type of person where if I go somewhere and I don't want to be there, I will kind of become crude just as so I don't get invited again. And so hopefully like it's like uncomfortable and I can be like, all right, well, I gotta go. I think I picked that up from watching a lot of like Curb Your Enthusiasm and stuff like that, right? And so
That's exactly what I was watching before the.
really,
Yeah.
but so I went with an ex to a wine tasting and we get there and I'm like, man, this is awesome. And they sit us down in this table and it's the most pretentious thing, right? And they're just like, you know, we're friends with the governor, we're this, we're that. We met through Ivy League school. And it's just this super pretentious circle. And so they finally get to us and they're like, well, how did y'all meet? What do y'all do? And we're like, well, before she could even talk, because she was very much the type to like play the role, right? Like she was in a way she was great like that, right? She could very much professional network and things like that. Before I knew she could answer, because I was like, no, this is not where I want to be. I said, we're just sexual friends. Everyone's face dropped. And, and so I thought, like, okay, it'll be uncomfortable. Well, then they start pouring the wine. Everyone gets real loose. By the end of it, like the lady who was friends with the governor was telling us all sorts of like marriage problems. And, the other lady was like, there, like everyone just like, I guess they said, like, well, this dude's kind of just a F up, so let's just be ourselves. And before it, like I think people were exchanging phone numbers and like, oh my gosh, we got to do this again. And it flipped it. And I thought, like, that's crazy. I wanted to get out of here. I was myself because I make a lot of jokes. I don't know if you've read some of the cruder parts of the book, but that's me. And I thought, like, oh, I'm going to scare these people away. And next thing you know, like for that night, it was this table that just cracking up. We were the loudest ones out there. Just everyone's laughing and having a great time. Yeah, and I feel like that can happen in a lot of different places where you're like, all right, let's see what happens. The Larry David thing, and then sometimes it turns out like a really cool story like that.
Oh my God, this loosen up thing, it's so funny when it happens. I feel I've seen it in like different environments. I feel especially with when like even I think when hanging out with like other comedians and everyone's kind of like, oh yeah, they're trying to talk about like their biggest achievements while I'm like, like I genuinely, I struggled going to the toilet in the past week. And when the conversation becomes like natural and actually like I don't care about like your like the trophy or whatever happened 2 years ago. I'd rather talk about something that's happened now. And yeah, things change, and it changed for the better. And That's funny because I used to do wine training in one of my previous jobs, and I agree. I feel like some of the things I used to hear, and yeah, like I feel like it's a combination of like drinking wine, I guess, as well. Where like at the beginning, I remember when I started the sessions, people would be like so uptight, and everyone would just try to be like, oh yeah, I'm the. I remember once there was this someone going like, oh, I'm a part of a royal family, not the UK one, not the British one. But this person was like, "Oh, I'm a part of the royal family," and they were very like uptight. And then by the end of the night, they were probably like the happiest and like the funniest people I've seen, and they were doing all sorts of stuff. But I was going to, to ask you about like now with again starting to write, right?
Hmm.
Again, that's a weird way to say. Yeah, so starting to write. Was that your first creative? Like, have you always had that as a creative outlet, or is it something that you stumbled across? Because you're also talking about how you're like you're a funny person. So was like what was there? I don't know, even like comedy, or was it anything else that you used as an outlet, or how did you come across writing, or is it something that you actually studied in, I don't know, like high school, university, etc.? How did it happen?
Yeah. So the girlfriend I moved to Austin with, she kind of gave me an ultimatum because I was like, I don't want to go to college. I want to get a job and grow within that job. And, my parents, highly successful, none of them had gone to college. And so I thought, like, I want to do that. Like, I'll find some sort of trade job and do that. And, she kind of gave me the ultimatum. I heard that getting an English degree was one of the easiest degrees to get. And so I said, yeah, cool, I'll do that, right? It's going to be easy. I get a degree. So I did that. And funny enough, we broke up like right when I started school. But that I had always written in like journals and things like that, but I had never like really done anything like that. And so I did that, and it was a ton of fun. And there were like short stories that I would write and try to publish, and I would workshop, and I always got really positive feedback, so I loved it. But like from a creative outlet, like I've always tried to do something. Like I play the drums, and I absolutely love that. And so I was in a band. I started as a lead singer, and then our drummer quit, and so then I went from lead singer to drummer. I've played drums since like eighth grade, and I'm almost 42, so it was just one of those things where like I loved singing. I wasn't good at it, but I loved singing. But at the same time, I loved drumming, and so it went into that. So whether I was writing lyrics when I was doing that or something, it was just something that I did as a creative outlet. I didn't really tell a whole lot of people, that I did. I think people knew that I liked to, and they would back then. I would do like a lot of poetry readings and things like that. But it wasn't that. And then when everything went down, it transitioned from like a hobby thing to like an outlet, right? Like an ability for me to like, I almost want to say like if I really think and go back to old writings, the book probably started more as a journal than it is what it did today. And there were, I think, like two chapters where they included like these fake journal entries. And so, it's one of those things where, it was such a therapeutic thing to sit there and write and to sit there and you know I feel like the Marco in the story is the Marco that never got better, and so in a weird way I feel like that Marco, I was spending time with that Marco when that Marco didn't really have anyone to spend time with, right? And so it was one of those things that just kind of morph that way. Now, to your other question about like the comedy, I first off, my both sides of my family are hilarious, right? They love to roast people. They love to, I mean, they make fun of absolutely everything, right? Funny story. My great grandmother, she was super super old, and then they found breast cancer, and they still said like, hey, we're gonna take the tumor out. The story goes that they were broke, broke, broke. But the story goes that right before they put her under, my uncle who took her and the doctor that was there that they were going to put her under, she stopped them and she said, "Hey, that piece of, fat that you're going to take out, can we keep it?" And they were like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, well, next time we're out of oil, we'll use it to cook." And of course, like everyone cracks up, and so I think coming from those sides were like it was just like a natural progression to be funny, because in order to survive those families, you had to be funny. And then at the same time, like there were so many deaths in the family, like really early on. There was a lot of like divorces. And so I realized that from a coping mechanism, you can make a really scary situation, you can disarm it very quickly if you can make everyone laugh. And so I feel like as a kid, whenever my parents would fight or argue or whatever, I always remember trying to be funny to kind of bring everyone back down, right? And so, yeah, that was one of it. And so the last piece I'll say is I started to do readings on the book. And as you've now seen, like in talking to me, I'm not a sad person. The book is terribly sad, but I'm not. And I would sit at these readings, and it was just like, I mean, I just felt bad. Like occasionally I would hear someone kind of like sniffling, like crying. And so finally I thought, you know what, guys, like the book is sad. It goes from bad to worse. This is not a self-help book. If you want to read it, like sit with that character. In case you're in there, you can sit together. But there's a part in the story where the guy tells a joke at a funeral. I'm going to start with that joke. And then from there, it slowly transitioned into me just doing stand-up at these readings. And I would do this. I would always do the spiel, right? Like, if you want to be sad, here's a book. I'll give you a free copy if you want it. But if I'm just going to sit here and tell jokes. And so I did that, and it was awesome because next thing you know, I would get emails like, "Hey, we're going to have a reading. Can you come out? Can you do this? Can you do that?" And it was really cool, and it's opened up the doors. I actually am right now. There's a comedian I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but there's a comedian who read the book, loved the book, and we're actually writing a book together now. And so it's really cool because even though the book is terribly sad, I've been able to make like a ton of jokes out of it and or a ton of jokes from it. Not that I joke about it, but next thing you know, it's like it's opened up a really bunch of opportunities to kind of grow. And I don't write the genre that we're writing, but it's been awesome to flex a new muscle and seeing if, hey, can I do it or not?
Yeah, and I think with stuff like this, it's such again the transition. It's there, it's possible
Hmm.
because yeah, I feel like especially because somehow I kind of like comedy, at least in many situations, it's actually the talking about like I guess sometimes talking about like something that's sad or bad and then just having like a twist to it. So then technically every I think and again I'm gonna butcher this because it's a quote actually, but I can't remember from whom, but it was something to do with the case that every joke it's a sad story with a twist at the end, and that's exactly what it is. Like no, sorry, my bad. I told you I was gonna butcher it. Every sad story can be a joke
Hmm.
because it's just about the way you're going to end it. It's about the punchline. You can have the one of the like the worst thing that's happened to you, and then if you manage to change or like to twist it around, it can be a joke. You still obviously acknowledge everything that's happened to you. You still, you can still address things that you want to address, but you also manage to bring a laugh. And I feel like in so many situations that I've been in, some of the saddest moments that I've ever been a part of, if someone said a joke or if I were to say a joke, I feel like those were actually like the best moments of that sad experience.
Hmm. Totally
So
agree with you.
yeah, I can see how why and how it would work. That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
I think when you can say a joke, you're telling life, I'm not scared right now. And I think that there's this sense of accomplishment of sitting in a sad story, whatever the case is. And I think when you laugh, you look back at that fear and say, like, I'm not scared of you. And I think that that's a powerful thing.
And I don't know if you've came across that, but I've noticed it from personal experience when we talk about writing. That, for example, a couple of years ago, I was trying to talk about my parents during my stand-up, but it didn't really work. Someone gave me the advice that hey, before you can talk about something on stage, you got to make sure that you've made peace with it. Guess because at the time I was still, I mean, again, I feel like it's still an ongoing thing. I grieve with the loss of my parents. Probably I'll have it forever, but I feel like it's just in a different way now. I'm at more peace with the situation and with everything that's happened, and now the same stories are absolute, if I can say so myself, absolute killers.
That's
I have
awesome.
like, yeah, like after shows I have people going like, hey, that bit I think that was like amazing, or oh, that story that you said, like the thing that you said about your dad, absolutely great, or like, oh, that thing about your mom, I loved it. And I'm like, oh, okay. And again, it all started because, yeah, that a friend of mine, David, who's also is a London-based comedian, but he was like, hey, look, you might want to try and address it and make peace with it first before you can actually go on stage and do it, because it's, I guess, yeah, like you said, it's about this, not only saying that, hey, I'm cool with this or I got this, it's more to actually mean it as well, because obviously
Yeah.
sometimes you can have, you can try and lie to yourself, but you can't lie to the people in the audience, or you can't lie to the people who can see like, hey, the vibe is a bit off in
Hmm.
this moment. While yeah, I feel like through this like acceptance and again a lot of work and a lot of like medication and therapy, I got to the
Yeah.
point where I was like, hey, I can make those jokes and it feels good. And I feel like sometimes I have a joke about like my parents not being alive, and sometimes the audience goes like, oh, and I'm like, it's okay, guys, like I'm laughing, and I think my parents would laugh if they were here, and that
Yeah.
changes the mood. I'm like, okay, perfect, cool,
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah. I think also like you're vulnerable up there telling the joke. And I also think sometimes the audience feels vulnerable about laughing about it. Right. And so that's when they start to think like, is it okay to laugh at this? Is it not okay? And then I think once there's an agreement, like, hey, we're good. And the feedback that you got, I love that, right? Like, you can't really joke about it until you've healed from it. Gosh, that's absolutely true.
Yeah, it's again, it was I never thought about it like this, and it was just very eye-opening at the time. And I feel like it's even in the things that you're like talking about now, where you're talking about how the Marco in the book being like this, like being this fictitious version of the Marco that didn't get to change, or like didn't get to heal in some ways or other. It's very relatable. And there is another thing that I wanted to touch is the idea of like being able to sell books in like countries or like places where you're like, hey, I don't know anyone there. Like
Yeah.
this is such a cool, because I feel like that it's a shared feeling. I feel like with the podcast, when I first started, and I was like, oh, I got like some people from like my hometown to download it, or like I get some people from the city that I used to live to download it, or like people from London download it. But then when I have even like people from America, from like cities that I think it's like Iowa, it's a state that's like
Mhm.
we're doing really well in. I don't know anyone. I believe I don't know anyone from Iowa.
Yeah. But isn't that awesome how that works with the internet? Like, it's this weird, like, as soon as there's a connection, it just kind of grows. And then, yeah, I think that that's so interesting how small the world has become thanks to the internet.
Yeah, so I feel like you see that this is the best world, I guess the best side of the world that we live in, because obviously horrible things can be transferred through the internet in seconds, but also very
Yeah,
nice things. And like you
totally
said,
agree.
all these connections, and you out of curiosity, what was the and before I probably like what was the most I guess surprising place that you either saw that the book was sold in, or just the fact that you were like, I don't know, maybe it's either someone reached out or whatever. What was one of the, like, what were the places or something that you were like, hey, this is wild?
The Germany one, because now here's the thing that I love about Europe. Everyone seems to learn English and Spanish, right? Like, it's
Yeah.
such a natural thing for them to learn it. But the Germany thing mind boggles me because my book's not in German, right? So I haven't explored looking at other languages or anything like that, but I think that that's been one of the ones where it's been really surprising, that it's happened. And then, as far as like just contacts in general, I've gotten a few emails where it's like, and honestly, geographically, I don't know, but one of the things, not necessarily geographically, but demographically, it's been really cool to have folks reach out to me that are super young, because unfortunately they're seeing MS in really young people. And then typically MS historically had always been like a female illness. I want to say someone told me once that it was even called like the crazy women's disease, like 50 years ago or something
Yeah, I
like
heard
that.
about that.
And so it's really cool too, because I've made some really great friendships with males that are like, I have it too, and I have similar experiences and whatnot. And so, it's been, I think demographically, that's been, eye opening. And then at the same time, like I said, the Germany thing, I feel like at one point I got to go over there because I feel, I owe them a few drinks, thanks to the sales that I've gotten over there.
Well, again, I feel like you were talking about like I feel like in mainland Europe is like such a big thing to speak English. And although I think the first time I read a book in English was actually in England, but and again, I feel like again because the like you said, the talking about MS, and especially I've just realized now that yeah, from like I guess like a male perspective, you're the first person I encountered too. So it actually shows that again, if anyone wanted to check someone's workout, it's something that's technically been like, is that the word, like untapped, or like something that's
Hmm.
not been done as much. And look, it's yeah, well done. It sounds wonderful, and yeah, again, thank you so much for taking the time. I wanted to ask now, because obviously you were talking about how, and I will put the name of the book in the bio. But if you want to tell people where can they like see your work, whether there is anything else coming up, whether there's this like European tour that you were talking
Yeah,
about and visiting London. We'd love to have. I'd love to have you here, and I'd love to hang out. But yeah, if
yeah.
anything that you feel like it's happening that you can share for the beginning of 2025, which sounds wild to think of, but
It
yeah.
does. Yeah, so the best way to reach out. So my book is online. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Now, that being said, those are the main American online stores. But as you could see, wherever in the world, the way that the publisher set it up, there's going to be a bookstore. But if you just search, like I said, within normal limits, Marco Gamboa at your favorite bookstore, if they have an online presence, you should be able to find the book. You can also find my website at wnlmarco.com. And then from there, you could see my socials. I'm really only active on Instagram, and that's where I'll post if I'm having readings. I'll post these podcasts and so on. But yeah, and if you don't want to buy the book, but you just want to connect and need help to resources, I'm happy to point you. I was part of the MS Society for a good while, and I have a bunch of contacts there, and I believe they have a global presence. So if anyone needs help, just reach out, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction.
Thank you so much, Marco. I really appreciate you taking the time, man.
Thank you, thank you.
Perfect. Well, yeah, we'll wrap it up from now, but I genuinely love a part two in person in London when you're
I,
here.
we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.
You too.
That was good, right? I mean, it was good. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed recording it. And yeah, make sure you check out Marco's work. Again, it was such a. I think it makes me happier about everything, regardless of how bad it's going on um, at the moment. Even just from like re-listening to it while putting the episode together. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to speak with Marco again at some point soon. Hopefully, when he's visiting UK, or maybe who knows? Fingers crossed. When I get to go to America, because I'd love to actually go to San Antonio. I'm a Spurs fan, and yeah, that would be truly amazing. But hey, look, that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening. You know what to do if you like this episode. And then, yeah, if you like me and Marco. And I think from me, Pika and Sarma, that's it. We're off now to lick our wounds and, recover. We'll see you next week. Until then, stay skillful. Bye.